Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your practice. I hope this finds you in good health and secure. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'll remind you before we get into it, if you could please like and subscribe to this Sangha. You help perform Bodhisattva action to get this information out to more people. It comes up better in the searches in Google, blah, blah, blah. All right, Lankavatara. It's getting meatier and meatier, isn't it? Slow to progress, but we went through some intense analysis in the last one. This one continues that trend. We will talk about Nirvana and the multitudinous interpretations, correct and not correct. And this is what Shakyamuni will investigate for Mahamati's understanding. At that time, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the emancipated one. Nirvana. Nirvana is talked of by you, the emancipated one. What does this term designate? Now, what does it mean? What does it designate? So, what is it pointing toward? What is the nirvana that is discriminated by all the philosophers? So the answer is partially in the question, isn't it? If it's discriminated, obviously the domain of the philosophers, then how can it go by the same name? What is that nirvana as opposed to the nirvana that you talk about? Asking of Shakyamuni, yeah? So, of course, the standard form, listen well, listen and, inculcate this into your thinking. And Shakyamuni begins to say, as to such nirvanas as are discriminated by the philosophers, there are really none in existence. What they talk about is nonsense. There is no nirvana in the discriminations. You can't discriminate a state of nirvana. It's not one state as opposed to another. It's a falling away of all states, isn't it? So how is he going to discuss that? Some philosophers conceive nirvana to be found where a system of mentation no more operates owing to the cessation the cessations of the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas, or to the indifference to the objective world, or to the recognition that all things are impermanent. You see by now how that's utter folly, right? There are lots all over the Western world and certainly in the Eastern world as well. And I'm not even talking about mysticism. We're talking about philosophers here, logicians, people who tend to identify and discriminate all the aspects of being and decide on which are useful and which are not. The very idea, and I want you to think about this, Nirvana being a system of mentation, of thinking, of mind, where no more operates owing to the cessation of the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas. You know, we've discussed the skandhas many times, right? What are the skandhas? They are those primary sense fields, consciousnesses, the first 6 consciousnesses of seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, right? Touch, taste, so on. So if you cease those, well, then you'll be able to think freely. Well, I've got news for you, philosophers. If you cease vision, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, you're dead. You're no longer a sentient mind. Those sense organs are how you relate to this samsaric physical life. If all those sense organs are gone, you're a vegetable. Oh, I guess that's the goal then. Be in a vegetative state so you can think like that horrible, horrible medical condition known as locked-in syndrome. Really? That's nirvana? It's idiotic. Or where there's no recollection of the past and present, just as when a lamp is extinguished or when a seed is burnt or when a fire goes out, because then there is the cessation of all substrate, what I call apparatus, yeah? Which is explained by the philosophers as the non-rising of discrimination. Of course there's no discrimination. You're a rock. When you're dead, there's no discrimination because there no longer exists a mind with which to think. Philosopher, it's so ridiculous, but it's identified appropriately. But Mahamani Nirvana does not consist in mere annihilation. Once again, I'm always repeating this. Here, Shakyamuni is identified as saying it verbatim, if this translation has any accuracy at all, yes? Again, some explain deliverance by going to another quarter, another abode. Astral planes will move to some other mental space. Always about immolating this substrate, apparatus. It's ridiculousness. It's magical thinking. As when a wind stops blowing when the discrimination of objects ceases. Again, some philosophers explain deliverance by getting rid of the dualistic view of knower and known. Some conceive deliverance to be the cessation of discrimination where one sees permanence and impermanence. These are all mental tricks, right? And some of these philosophers call themselves Buddhists. So be aware. Again, some explain the discrimination of various forms as the bearer of pain, and yet not understanding that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, are alarmed by the notion of form and seek their happiness in formlessness. In this, they cherish the notion of nirvana. It's always an annihilating kind of replacement theory, like going to a Buddha land, like it's another place. We discussed that ad nauseum in Virmalakirti. This is the Buddha land. The only thing that changes is your experience of it, your perceptive, ongoing relation. The Buddha land is a living thing. It doesn't exist outside your life. The difference is your relation to this very world. If your identity is dependent on the world, then you're in samsara. No matter how you subdivide it and qualify it and what words you give it, that's all identification. Once you let your mind separate from all of that activity and become an observer of the activity, then you are truly experience all of life in every manifestation, unlimited, still with, to enjoy, partake, influence. Right? Again, some conceive this to be nirvana, that in consideration of generality and individuality, recognizable in all things, inner and outer, they are never destroyed, maintaining their being throughout the past, present, and future. That's close, but that's still attached. That's recognition of everything that is samsaric. That's not emancipation. Again, some conceive that nirvana is an ego soul, a being, a vital force, a nourisher, a supreme spirit, and the indestructibility of all things. This is the subjugation of ourselves to something greater. The greater is in our mind. We are the greater. By dislodging ourselves from the diminution of selves, of thingness. Again, Mahamadi, some philosophers, owing to their foolishness, declare this to be nirvana, that there is a primary substance, there is a supreme soul, and they are seen differently by each one of us, and that they produce all things from the transformation of the qualities. Blah, 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 more word salad. It's blowing dust out of the hand to make a being in the image of a being. Because, natural evolution of work and energy can't produce anything. There has to be a blueprint, some master controller. Why? That's so admired in identity. Ego. Well, there must be a super ego. And we're all slavishly enacting. We're all the little puppets of his game, her game. It's such ridiculous folly. Why not own your life completely? Why always a victim? Why always life happening to us? Why not understanding that we are brilliant witnesses of a process of life, and that I am simply an observer from a particular vantage point, seeing this drama of the universe play out, completely immerse myself in the being of it without being identified and attached to the stuff of it. Everything being this transformation moment to moment to moment of being. Some conceive nirvana to consist in the extinction of merit and demerit, some in the destruction of the passions by means of knowledge, some in regarding Ishvara as the free creator of the world. There it is, that ultimate God. Some think that the world is born of interaction and that there is no special cause other than this cause, and clinging to it, they have no awakening because of stupidity. And they conceive nirvana to consist in this non-awakening, right? Ignorance is bliss. If you're stupid enough, you'll be enlightened. Wow. Yeah? Sometimes if you just take the offerings of some of these groups, philosophers, religions, and you just take them literally and just swap some words for what they think they're saying, what they're saying completely falls apart of its own weight. It's so ridiculous. Again, Mahamadi, some philosophers conceive nirvana to be the attaining of the true path. Some cherish the thought of nirvana as where there is the union of qualities and their owner, from which there is oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness. Some imagine that nirvana is where they see the self-nature of things existing all by its own nature, such as the variegated feathers of the peacock, variously formed precious stones, or the pointedness of a thorn. Now, I can't help but recognize in this Shakyamuni's identifying in this discourse, right? He has two ways of teaching. In this discourse, he's alluding to many sects that spawned from his earlier teaching. In the early texts, his early teaching, sermons, often called Hinayana, or the Agama Sutras, the earlier teachings, sects would fall into these groups. I mean, I'm sure you recognize some of these statements. Well, that sounds suspiciously like what you've been talking about, Sylvain. Yeah, but there's several missing components. That's what we need to identify in the discourse. The adherence. Like attaining the true path. That's a pretty vague statement. But this is an allusion to those who would take the Eightfold Noble Path, right? A teaching of Shakyamuni. And by staunchly and adamantly adhering to those rules of behavior, mistake being a great follower of those rules to be itself enlightenment. It's not. Those are guidelines to help you to self-realize the nature of samsara, the nature of life process in its instantiations. But that itself is not nirvana. It's a path toward the truth, but it's itself not the truth, right? These are tools. It's like saying, I'm going to go to, well, Sears doesn't exist anymore, but I don't know, Snap-on or Amazon, and buy all of the tools you need to work on a car. And boy, you set up your garage, and you've got the cabinets, and you've got the shelves, and you've got the magnets on the wall, and you've got an outline for every tool you have, electronic, mechanical, fluid, blah, blah, blah. And you've got this amazing garage. And then you go out and you try to start your car and it won't start, or if it starts, it sputters, it runs like hell, and you can't make it run. And you think, what's wrong? I bought all the tools. I even set them up so well. Car still runs like crap. Yeah, I mean, if you heard somebody say that, could you hold yourself back from laughing? Or would you just be so taken aback, shocked, and fall on your butt as to think this person actually believes that if they have all the right tools, the car will work? That's what Shakyamuni's talking about. This kind of slavishness to words, thought, thinking. I have all the right things in place. Why ain't it happening? It requires your personal effort, your investment in time and energy. Some Mahamadi conceive nirvana in the recognition of the 25 tattvas, or truths. Some in the king's observance of the teaching of the 6 virtues. Again, same thing. If I just follow the program. No, you must do. This is why, as practitioners of the Lotus Sutra, we are uniquely qualified to attain enlightenment. Not attaining it as though it's something outside of ourselves, but actually attaining it by dissolving our obstacles of samsaric attachment, individuation, ego, and instantiating in this very moment Buddha-ness, equanimity, being with, moving in our momentum of energy through time-space, without saying this chair represents a part of what I am. What? How can you even say that? Enjoy the chair for what it is. You can sit in it. I can sit in it. Anyone can sit in it. It's being chair. It's chairness. And it's Sylvain-ness, Bob-ness, Judy-ness, Frank-ness, Marquita-ness, Ishlovikatara-ness. It's not an indelible actual thing. It's an action of being. So hard to convey, even in our wonderful language of English. All of these views of nirvana, severally advanced by the philosophers, with their reasonings, are not in accord with logic, nor are they acceptable to the wise being those who are learned in the actual process of life. Mahamadi, they all conceive nirvana dualistically and in a causal connection. By these discriminations, Mahamadi, all philosophers imagine nirvana, but there is nothing rising, nothing disappearing here, and there is no room for discriminations. Because nirvana is the very disconnection from discrimination, self and other. This begets that. Mahamadi, each philosopher relying on his own textbook, from which he draws his understanding and intelligence, examines the subject and sins against the truth, or violates the truth, because the truth is not such an imagined by him. His reasoning ends in setting the mind to wandering about and becoming confused, as nirvana is not to be found anywhere. Just like looking for detachment. If you identify detachment, then whatever you reach is not detachment, because you've identified it, therefore made it other. And you, by seeking it, are self and other. You are in the discriminations. Make sense? You say it like that, it does. Again, Mahamadi, there are others who, roaring with their all-knowledge as a lion roars, explain nirvana in the following way. That is, nirvana is where it is recognized that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, where there is no attachment to external objects, existence or non-existent, where getting rid of the 4 propositions, there is an insight into the abode of reality as it is, where recognizing the nature of the self-mind, one does not cherish the dualism of discriminations, where grasp and grasping are no more obtainable, where all logical measures are not seized upon as it is realized that they never assert themselves, where the idea of truth is not adhered to but treated with indifference because of its causing a bewilderment, where the attainment of the exalted Dharma, which lies within the inmost recesses of one's being, the two forms of egolessness are recognized, the two forms of passions subdued, and the two kinds of hindrance cleared away. Where the stages of bodhisattvahood are passed one after another until the stage of tathagatahood, beingness, is achieved or is attained, in which all the samadhis, beginning with the mayopama, the maya-like, the dream-like, are realized, and the sita, manas, and manovijnana are put away. They're not annihilated, they're put away, they're put aside. They no longer maintain our experience of life. They're simply another manifestation that we can watch at a distance without being entangled in them. Here indeed, they say, nirvana is to be found. Nirvana is severally conceived by the philosophers, but there's no more than imagination. It is not the way of emancipation. Released of bound and binding and free from all expediencies, the philosophers imagine they are emancipated, but emancipation is not to be found there. It's just another distinction, a discriminated version of self, version of ego, right? I am exalted. Really? Divided into many a school are the systems of the philosophers. There is thus no emancipation in them because of their imagination stupidly carried on. Wrongly imbued with the ideas of cause and effect, all the philosophers are beguiled, and theirs is thus no emancipation for them. There is thus no emancipation for them who are of the dualistic school of being and non-being. If you are enlightened because you're different than me as a being non-enlightened, then you've identified a discrimination and you don't understand enlightenment at all. That's a tough one, huh? The ignorant are, I'm reminded, anyway, the ignorant are delighted with discoursing and false reasoning. Words are fun, yeah? But they are unable to raise any great intelligence toward truth, tattva. Discoursing is a source of suffering in the triple world, while truth is the extinguisher of suffering. All we can do with words is lead to a more profound realization. That profound realization happens in mind alone. It cannot be discoursed. It can be discoursed about, leading to deeper understanding of the nature of the obstacles we have in our attachment to things. But at some point of dissecting our discriminations, we have to get insights that lead us to a breaking away, a uselessness of words. When you've said enough words to where words can't communicate the experience, you're getting close. Like an image seen in a mirror, which is not real, the mind is seen by the ignorant in a dualistic form in the mirror of habit energy, mistaking the mirror for presenting another form of self, the dualistic nature, making real the image in the mirror, rather than floating away from it as just another colorful spark of instantiations, yeah? When it is not thoroughly understood that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, the mind constructs that reflection. Dualistic discrimination takes place. When it is thoroughly understood that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, discrimination ceases. There is me-ness. There is the suchness of all of this, the mirror, the reflection, the body, the thing reflected. It's all a suchness, a process happening moment to moment. It is not two things. Mind is no other than multiplicity, and yet it is devoid of the qualified and qualifying. Forms are visible, but not in the way as seen, discriminated by the ignorant. The triple world is no other than discrimination. There are no external objects. Discrimination sees multiplicity. This is not understood by the ignorant. And I've talked about this many times, the very sparks that come together to form a chair, a guitar, this computer, or me and you, they're all the same. They're all forms of energy. In that we are all the same. We're just dancing around in different forms. But those forms are ephemeral. Those forms are something seen by the mind as permanentizing, as identifying. Once you get past the identifying, then it's all a flow, a process of life that we have the incredible opportunity to witness. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I know this is difficult. The truth is told differently, discriminated in the different sutras because of names and notions, yet apart from words, no meaning is attainable. That's an interesting one. So we've been talking a lot about using words to help us gain insights, to help us gain what we might call meaning. In other words, what do these words mean? But once you get an insight, once you attain a sort of understanding, that meaning, which is just another word for insight, an aha, a personal realization, then the words are gone. They just fall away. They don't need to be there. Because now the essential knowing, the understanding, that's not in the words. It's just that the words were used to get you to this point. All the words just go away. They're not meaningful. That's what he's saying here. If you go back, once you get this aha moment, once we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo and awaken our Buddha-ness, everything we've read to get us to that point, it's what's the saying? It's confetti on the floor after the party. It's not the party. Does it make sense? All right. Now, obviously, Mahamadi is going to be reeling after that one, and he's going to ask, okay, so that's the nature of Nirvana, then what's Buddhahood? So we will save that for the next video. I'm taking this in chunks like this because, honestly, there's a lot to consider. Even though it seems like a lot of repetition, there's a slight difference, isn't there? A perspective, attacking this idea of emancipation from several different points of view. And this particular chapter or section of the chapter deals a lot with, again, that history of Buddhism preceding the Lankavatara as we get into the one vehicle of the Mahayana, this is still a preparatory teaching, but a lot of the preparatory nature of this teaching is you've got to let go of what you think you know. All these earlier teachings were for you to learn how to think and what creates thinking and what the nature of thinking is. But now you need to get beyond that, beyond the discourse of the brilliant student and philosopher that think they have all of these teachings in the right order, and if I just do these 10 things and behave in these 255 ways and I restrict my... All you've done is turn the teaching into a deeper attachment to samsara. Going the wrong, not that way, not this way, come this way. Yeah, this is where we are in the Lankavatara. And to Mahamati, the personage of Mahamati, to his great to acknowledge him or them or us is that we have an inkling that there's more than just the words, that there's something, we're close, but it's not in everything we know. It's not in everything that we memorize, that there's something being identified here that, of course, resists identification because it exists without identification. How in the hell do we get there? This is Mahamati's struggle. This is the struggle of the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. How do I get to Buddhahood? They don't know about Namo Myoho Renge Kyo yet, right? This is years and years before. They're just starting to open their minds to that potential. And Shakyamuni is step by step leading them there. I'm hopeful and curious to see how we proceed and if we ever get there in the Lankavatara, or if it still leaves us with wanting, right? But perhaps we have a better idea what we're wanting by the end of the Lankavatara. We'll see. Stay tuned. Next bat episode, same bat time. Those of you who remember the old Batman series on TV, probably not many of you, but those of you who remember it will understand that one. Anyway, thank you for being here. As always, deeply, deeply gratified and humbled by your practice, your dedication. Keep it up. Keep good health. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.